successful than science.
Good afternoon, Earth. This is Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Edge in Taos, New Mexico, working on oil painting red, third in the primary triptych. Alright, I've got some half and half, pretty thick glaze mixed up with some liquid and brilliant red to sort of make all those cracks in the deep burgundy that are showing through that brilliant red glow even more so, and kind of glowing around the brightest of the red. And then I have some Payne's Gray and some Scarlet mixed up just to start rendering some forms and having fun with it. So, there we go.
There's another side of science, which is science as a worldview, or a dogmatic belief system. Now, most people, again, are incredulous when I suggest that science is a dogmatic belief system, because they say, well, surely science is the one thing that enables us to go beyond dogmatic beliefs. It's the one thing that pays full attention to evidence and free inquiry and open-minded thinking. That's an ideal of science, and it's an ideal that I share, but it's not one that's usually put into practice. Within the sciences, there's a very strongly defined set of beliefs, which most scientists don't even realize are beliefs. They think other people have beliefs, Christians, Buddhists, Muslims, and so on, but they don't have beliefs, they know the truth. And these beliefs are taken to be such established truths that they're not even discussed. When you study science, people don't say, these are the things you've got to believe, here's the creed. You absorb them as if by osmosis. They're just things that are so taken for granted, you assume they must be true. And most people outside the scientific world assume they must be true because science is so successful and has such huge prestige as a result of it. What I do in this book, Science Set Free, is take the 10 dogmas of modern science, the 10 most important dogmas, and I turn them into questions, treating them as hypotheses that can be tested rather than assumptions you can't challenge. The 10 dogmas are as follows. First, the belief that the whole world is mechanical or machine-like. The universe is a machine, animals are machines, plants are machines, humans are machines, lumbering robots, in Richard Dawkins' evocative phrase. So everything is basically mechanical. Machines differ from organisms in that organisms have their own self-organizing powers. They organize themselves. Plants grow by themselves, for example. They also have their own purposes or goals. Machines don't. Machines are designed from outside, and they don't have their own purposes. They just do what humans want them to do. They serve our purposes. The difference is clear if you compare trying to get somewhere in a car compared with riding there on a horse. If you get in the car, it'll go wherever you want it to go as long as it's in working order. If you get on a horse, it might easily have ideas of its own and not go where you want it to go because it's an organism, it's got its own goals. In the 17th century, by taking away purposes, designs, and so on from nature, and taking them outside nature, putting them in a transcendent machine-making God, the founders of modern science thought they were strengthening the case for religion by weakening the autonomy of nature. But they did so by enforcing on the sciences right from the very beginning this machine theory of nature, a mechanistic view. Now that's the first and most central assumption. But it's not a proof to many places of decimals tested by experiment, it's just a metaphor. You can't prove a metaphor, it's useful in certain respects but not in others. And my view is that nature is much better thought of as organic, as the universe is like a developing organism. Well, that's the first assumption or dogma. The second is that matter is unconscious. The universe is made up of atoms, molecules, stars, galaxies, crystals, all of which are completely unconscious. Everything in nature is unconscious, except human brains and maybe the brains of a number of other higher animals. Or for the liberal materialists, maybe going down as far as insects or worms. But nevertheless, matter itself is intrinsically unconscious. Then there's the assumption that the laws of nature are fixed. The laws of nature are the same today as they were at the moment of the Big Bang, and they'll be the same forever. And as well as the laws being fixed, the constants are fixed. The fundamental constants, like the gravitational constant, the speed of light, and so on, have always been the same. The next assumption is that the total amount of matter and energy is always the same, the principle of conservation of matter and energy. Next, that nature is purposeless. The whole of nature is devoid of purpose, and the entire evolutionary process has no purpose or direction. Next, biological inheritance is material. Everything that organisms inherit is inherited materially, mainly as DNA, or now there's added complexity through epigenetic modifications of the DNA, or through cytoplasmic inheritance. But essentially, most people treat the word hereditary as if it's synonymous with genetic. Assumption number 7 is that memories are stored as material traces inside the brain. Everything you remember is somehow encoded and stored inside your brain. Dogma 8, the mind is inside the head. Mental activity is brain activity. It's all inside your head. Assumption 9 to dogma 9 follows from number 8. Psychic phenomena are illusory. Things like telepathy may appear to exist. Lots of people may believe they've had telepathic experiences, but that's because they're not smart enough to realize it's just coincidence or must have some other perfectly normal explanation. It's an illusion. And dogma 10, mechanistic medicine is the only kind that really works. Alternative and complementary therapies may appear to work, but that's because people have got better anyway, or it's just the placebo effect. But mechanistic medicine is the only real kind of medicine, and that's why governments almost exclusively fund research on mechanistic medicine and not on other kinds, and why insurance companies and national health services confine almost all their funding to mechanistic medicine, because it's the only kind that really works. It's scientific medicine. Well, those are the 10 beliefs which underlie the modern worldview. Within science, some of them are questioned by some scientists in some areas of science, and as I hope to show today and tomorrow, all of them really have been superseded by advances in science itself. But nevertheless, these are the beliefs that most people pick up during the course of their scientific education, or indeed in the course of any kind of education, because almost all modern people have been brought up to have a respect for science and to believe it must be true. So these are the default assumptions of most educated people. Now when we turn them into questions, things look very different. First of all, within science you're not meant to question them. If you question them, you break taboos, and there's all sorts of sanctions against breaking taboos. I don't have time this evening to go into all 10 delusions, but I'll just deal with 2 or 3 of them. Tomorrow I shall speak in more detail about these in the workshop at CIIS. I'll start with the total amount of matter and energy is always the same. This very familiar assumption. The assumption is the total amount of matter and energy has always been the same since the moment of the Big Bang, when all the matter and energy in the universe suddenly appeared. As my friend Terence McKenna used to say, modern science is based on the principle, give us one free miracle and we'll explain the rest. And the one free miracle is the appearance of all the matter and energy in the universe and all the laws that govern it from nothing in a single instant. As Terence used to say, that's the limit case of credulity. If you can swallow that, you can swallow anything. The normal belief is that the total amount of matter and energy is always the same. This is the assumption that I myself questioned last. I only really questioned it 2 or 3 years ago. I questioned all the others during the course of my scientific career, but not that one. I thought this is the one that's most certain, that's most unquestionable. And it's the one that I believed longest, because I learned it in high school. It was something I learned in elementary physics lessons. I thought, though, I should include it in this book because It's certainly one of the powerful assumptions of science, one of the most venerable assumptions. And I also thought it would be good to find at least one of the dogmas of science was true. I didn't want to seem one-sided by finding all 10 were false. I hoped that this one would turn out to be true. I had nothing against it to start with. But the more I looked into it, the more dodgy it seemed, until I now see it as a house of cards built on foundations of sand, to combine metaphors. First of all, what's the history? Is this something people have established by detailed experiments measuring things with incredible accuracy to many places of decimals? No. This dogma is based on philosophical and theological assumptions that have been around for centuries, even millennia. In ancient Greece, the philosophers of ancient Greece were trying to find different ways of conceiving of reality, and for them the ultimate reality was eternal and essentially changeless. The Pythagoreans thought that ultimate reality was numbers and mathematics, proportions and ratios. The Platonists thought that the ultimate reality was the realm of eternal ideas or forms beyond space and time. And the materialists, the founders of modern materialism, or also known as the atomists, said no, the ultimate reality was matter. Matter was made up of lots of little bits, atoms, which couldn't be split up by definition. They couldn't increase in number or decrease in number. The total number was always the same. Therefore, implicitly, the total amount of matter is always the same. It's a philosophical assumption. And when atomism was reincorporated into science in the 17th century, this assumption was carried over. God made all the atoms in the first place at the creation of the world, and being God-made and God-given, the total number remains the same forever. God also imposed motion on the world machine when he started it off. And because the motion or energy in the universe is God-given, that too is fixed in amount and can't possibly decay or wear away, because it's basically a divine principle put into nature at the beginning. That's the basis of these assumptions. They were codified in the 19th century, in the 1850s in fact, in the laws of thermodynamics and in the principle of conservation of matter and energy, and appear to be certain truths. But while most of us may pay a great deal of reverence to these principles, physicists themselves have felt less bound by them. In the 1980s, it became clear that galaxies were attracting each other much more than they ought to. If you add up all the matter in the stars, make a generous allowance for black holes and planets and gas clouds, if you think of all the mass they might have, and they were attracting other galaxies much more than they should by gravitation if you add up all that matter. It also turned out that stars within galaxies were being attracted much more than they should have been, according to the amount of matter in the galaxies. So something was wrong with this model. So how could physicists fix it? Well, simple. They could increase the amount of gravity by just adding in more matter to their equations. You add in exactly the right amount to make the equations balance. And what is this matter they've added in? Well, it's dark matter. We don't know what it is, but we know it must be there because it makes the equations balance. To this day, nobody knows what dark matter is. Its nature is literally obscure. And there's 5 times more of it than there is of regular matter. Now, is dark matter conserved? Is the total amount always the same? Can it be converted to regular matter? So could regular matter just appear from nowhere or disappear into dark matter? Nobody knows, because nobody knows what dark matter is, how it works, or what it does. But this caused a new problem, because suddenly there's all this extra matter in the universe, which meant the whole universe was more massive than anyone had previously supposed. And now what about the expansion of the universe? The universe is expanding, but it's also being pulled back by gravitation, the gravitation of everything within the universe. So now there's a lot more matter in the universe. It ought to be causing the universe to slow down in its expansion and finally stop expanding and then begin to contract. In the 1990s, that's what most cosmologists thought, that the universe was going to slow down, then contract until it all ended in tears. in the reverse of the Big Bang, known in the trade as the Big Crunch. Everything would finally implode into a black hole. But around 1998, it turned out that, from observation of distant galaxies, that far from slowing down, the expansion of the universe was speeding up. Things were expanding faster and faster. Now, how could you explain that? There was nothing in physics that could explain that, and yet it seems to be happening. So, simple. They found a way of explaining that. There must be a new kind of energy in the universe that's pushing everything apart. Dark energy. And just add in the right amount that you need to make the equations balance and fit the observations, and you fix the problem. But it causes yet another problem for physics, because it turns out the amount of dark energy is increasing. As the universe expands, you get more dark energy. The universe is now a perpetual motion machine. The total amount of dark matter and dark energy vary from time to time as physicists titrate the amounts to make their equations balance. But roughly speaking, today the current estimate is that just over 96% of the universe consists of dark matter and dark energy. Less than 4% consists of the kind of matter and energy you learned about at school, and to which these laws of conservation of matter and energy are supposed to apply. What if dark energy can be converted into regular energy? What if regular energy can be converted into dark energy? Is that possible? Nobody knows. This room is full of dark matter and dark energy. We've no idea how they might be interacting with processes going on in our physical world. Meanwhile, in quantum theory, an essential part of it is the idea that there's the quantum vacuum field, or the zero-point field, on which the regular forms of matter and energy are just like waves on the ocean, that the world is filled with another kind of energy, the zero-point energy, or quantum vacuum field energy. The quantum vacuum is not a vacuum, it's a plenum. It's full of energy. Now, what does that do? It certainly makes the equations of quantum physics work, because they can bring in virtual photons and virtual particles from the quantum vacuum field and then magic them away again to make the whole thing work mathematically. But what if we could tap it? Could we tap any of these mysterious forms of energy in the universe? Well, the usual assumption is, of course not, because the conservation of matter and energy forbids all these kinds of perpetual motion machine ideas. But the world is full of inventors working in garages and sheds who claim to have above-unity devices, free energy devices. Go online and search for above-unity devices and you'll find a vast array of claims out there. Some of these get financed up to a certain point. They make these devices, they demonstrate them. I've seen one of them in England. A friend of mine is in a company that has developed one of these devices. It does indeed seem to give out twice as much energy as you put in. It's been tested in a couple of universities who've written reports, couldn't find anything wrong with it, but didn't want their reports to be published because it would discredit their university and their physics department, because this is such a taboo area. So, do any of these devices work? If they did, they could provide boundless amounts of energy that would completely transform the world economy and ecology and change the way we think about the future. Do they work or don't they? Nobody knows, because there's no scientific tests done of these in the official world, because they're completely taboo. They defy this dogma. Because they defy this dogma, they're kept in the fringe areas of science. They're in the realm of parascience or fringe science, where all sorts of extraordinary claims are made, many of them perhaps quite absurd. What can we do about it? Well, nothing if we stick with business as usual in science. If we don't, though, if we take the view that perhaps some of these forms of energy really exist and can be tapped, take seriously what science is actually telling us, how would you find out? Well, my suggestion is a competition, $1 million prize. The best above-unity device would win the prize. People could submit their various claims, their devices, have them tested by engineers and physicists who would not be trying to debunk them, but be given honest appraisal of whether this is working as it seems to. Some have already been tested and do seem to work as they're claiming to. If anyone wins this prize, I think it would change the climate, because people would then invest in these things and things would happen. Right now, they have small investors, but as soon as they go to the big investors, like the big energy companies, they then call up their physics advisors, and within 5 minutes the guy will say, these people are claiming it's above unity. That's impossible. This is just another perpetual motion machine crank. Forget it. So the prejudice is so great that it's very hard for them to get investment. If anyone won this prize, I think the climate would completely change. And if nobody won it, because if none of them really work, the conventional people would have the sweet delight of saying, I told you so. But for the first time, we'd have experimental evidence they're right, instead of just an assumption and a whole blanket denial of alternative possibilities. It turns out that the principle of conservation of matter and energy when applied to living organisms is equally dodgy. And this was one of the most shocking discoveries for me. I'm a biologist, and I'd always taken for granted that living organisms follow the law of conservation of matter and energy. When I looked into the history, I found that it wasn't at all clear what was going on. In the early 19th century, particularly in Germany, many biologists thought that living organisms had another kind of energy over and above the regular kinds, they called it vital energy, or life force. In the 1850s, Hermann von Helmholtz, better known as a physicist, made it his mission to prove that living organisms were nothing but machines. He was a doctor in the Prussian army and a medical student when he formed this desire to refute vitalism, the doctrine that there was something special about living organisms. He tried to prove it by doing experiments with frogs' legs, making them twitch by electrical stimulation and measuring the heat given out to try and show they followed normal laws of heat and work. He couldn't get any accurate results, so he gave up an empirical test and stuck to a theoretical argument. Living organisms are machines, therefore they obey the normal laws of physics and chemistry and conservation of matter and energy, therefore living organisms are machines. It was a circular argument. He assumed what he set out to prove, and after that it was taken as a certain fact in biology. It wasn't until 1899 that anyone tried to test this experimentally with human beings, and it was one test with a dog before that. In the United States, Atwater and Benedict, who were two of the founders of nutrition science in America, had people in calorimeters, insulated boxes. They'd live in them for several weeks. All the gases going in and out were measured, the urine, the feces, the food, the energy, and so on. And they did this to establish, or as they put it, demonstrate, that organisms, living humans, were nothing but machines obeying the regular laws of physics. Their first results turned out to be wrong, so they simply changed the correction values for the nutritive values of the foods so they could get the right answer. But, and they came up with a result in agreement with the theory to an accuracy of 99.9%. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. This was now proved. It was the foundation of nutrition science. It was a firm foundation for biology. People wrote articles saying it was the last nail in the coffin of vitalism and so forth. It wasn't until the 1970s that this work was re-examined by an American nutritionist called Paul Webb, working in the Midwest. He redid their experiments and found huge discrepancies. He found that people who were obese and doing very little exercise put out about 25% less energy than they ought to have done, whereas people who were not eating and doing a lot of exercise somehow had access to 25% more energy than they should have done. He then looked back at the classical results of Atwater and Benedict. They'd found similar discrepancies, but they'd carefully got the right number of people below the average and the right number above the average, so they cancelled out to give this perfect expected result. When Webb published his results showing these massive discrepancies, instead of it causing consternation in the world of nutrition science, it was just ignored. Everyone knew Webb must be wrong. He must have just got the figures wrong or done his sums wrong, because everyone knew the truth already, that living organisms, including humans, obey the normal laws. When people in other cultures, like Hindus, talk of prana or Chinese or Japanese talk of chi or ki energy, this is treated as purely metaphorical. It can't be real, because we know that living organisms obey the normal laws of ordinary energy. But nutrition science is full of anomalies. All over the world, in India, in medieval Europe, in China, there are people who claim in the United States to be able to live without food. These breatharians, as they're now called, have a long ancestry in many parts of the world. Some have been tested and found to be fraudulent. Some have been tested by scientists over the centuries, including quite recently in India, and found to be mysteriously able to live in apparent defiance of the normal laws of energy. Now, the normal assumption is these people are complete frauds. Anyone who investigates them must be a flaky
It's kind of looking like a lava
Any
lamp,
results that
but
don't
that'll
keep up,
change.
these people must be fraudulent or flawed.
I got a couple minutes
and
left, but
the
that
issue's
gets a
closed.
few
What if it
forms
isn't
in
closed?
and a few shadows in.
If I were a
And
nutrition
we're going to do
scientist,
garage art all
this
day
would
tomorrow,
seem
so I
to be
might
one of
take
the
the
most
day
interesting
on the mellow
questions
side,
we
spent
could
yesterday
possibly
cleaning
ask.
up
Is there some other
after
form
a
of energy?
painting session.
The
And
one certain
took
finding in
about a
nutrition
third of a
science
Sunday
in the last
yesterday, so
20
maybe today I'll
years
take
is
2/3
the
of a Sunday and
important
call it
effects
good.
of caloric
So
restriction.
anyway, thanks for watching this. Adam
Organisms
Search
that
Podcast
have
from the Mushroom
fed,
Ancient Tales
half
from
the
Mexico,
normal
working in oil
calories,
painting
generally
red,
speaking,
third
live,
in the
much longer
primary
than
triptych.
those who get the normal diet, and this applies to people,
Have a good day.
mice, yeast, all sorts